think of grass like a solar farm. If your range in your pasture is a giant solar farm made up of solar panels, when are they capturing the most energy? It's when the sun's up, the panels are facing it, and all the panels are in place. And if it is capturing the least amount of energy, it's when panels are broken, it's cloudy out. There's no panels there to catch sun that's coming down. There's interruptions in that cycle that are minimizing the amount of power that solar farm can put out. You can view your grass in the same scenario of, if you're not maximizing that leaf availability for photosynthesis, you're not maximizing your grass production. So if you're looking at different grasses and how they photosynthesize differently and at different times of the year, if you can take your inventory of what different plants and what like dominated pastures you have around your ranch and know when they're most valuable in their photosynthesis cycle as far as their growth season and growth curve throughout the season, and you're maintaining the maximum amount of leaves on those plants during those times, you're maximizing the amount of energy that that plant can produce. If you're maximizing the amount of energy that plant can produce, you're maximizing that plant's potential. If that plant can fully photosynthesize, fully build its root structure, and make it through a grazing season at its peak capacity, it's completely ready to do it again next year. It has all the reserves built up it needs. It has all the available energy it could ever possibly have. It'll maintain feed value for longer into the year if you were to use it, say, in dormant season grazing. It might have a little more sugar content, a little more protein content if it had the ability to completely process. A way you can look at that is if the key plants or the plants that you would like to be managing for in your pastures, are they making it to seed every year? If you see plants that are the backbone of that pasture not making it to seed, you might be using those plants a little too hard. That could be one recommendation on what to look for as far as use levels on your key species. And I guess to determine key species, it would basically be, when do you want to be using that pasture? If you're managing for diversity and managing for different timing of that pastures, you have to base it off what you used last and what you would like to use next. This relates back to, you have to know what plants are in your pastures and how valuable they are to your feed value and how much they contribute to your cattle performance. So if we go through the energy cycle of a grass plant throughout the year, that's really how we gauge what that plant can provide back to us that we can then use to turn into forage and value to put into cattle. If we think of a plant starting in the dead of winter, it is dormant. As spring warm-up happens, it's stealing sugar reserves from its roots to get up and start growing. That takes a tremendous amount of energy for that plant to turn on and start growing for the year. That's when your plant is draining its savings account, and therefore your pasture availability is draining its savings account of built energy. That plant has to get up and grow and be producing leaves and photosynthesizing before it's replenishing that reserve of energy in its root system. So as your plants are getting up and putting on leaves and growing and creating energy from sunlight and nutrients, that is existing within the leaf tissue before it is being transported down to the roots and being stored for later use. Your plants have to get up and be at their peak capacity of photosynthesize to maximize the energy going into their roots. That root energy is the resiliency in grass. That's the savings account that leads to you having more grass in unpredictable and challenging times, such as drought, low forage years, or even times when grass is used maybe more than it should be. That reserve of energy in the roots is what can make grass bounce back. So if you're looking at grass as creating a savings account for forage you have in the future, you have to maximize the energy that's going into those roots. And having grass that has matured and got to complete its life cycle has made it to where it has put that energy into its roots and is stored out in front of itself. So if you have basically carryover grass or reserves of grass out in front of you that have been allowed to mature and get their life cycle completed, where that energy has been transferred below ground, that's energy that will come back above ground later for cattle to use. So the key here is to remember that by allowing grass to grow completely and not being on grass as it's growing and reducing its ability to take energy and taking that stored energy from the growing relief material is something to keep in mind. So especially in a time of drought now where we're looking forward at restocking, if green up happens and you're looking to throw cows on grass as it's greening up, you're not letting that grass replenish the energy reserves that it would normally be replenishing to its root system on an average year. So that's just something to be thinking about as you're going forward in drought. You need to be building that savings account to be building any resiliency in your grass going forward. So as you're trying to allow plants to maintain their maximum performance, your cows have to be somewhere. So the idea there is if you can mix up where cows are throughout the year and change your use timing, your season of use, to where you're not using the same pastures at the same time every year, where different plants in a diverse mix are going to be growing and having their peak performance at different times. If you can rotate that around and be diversifying your use in response to those plants' availability, you're creating a more average resilience of each of those different plants throughout your area. Another thing people can look at is trying to stockpile forage out in front of them, so they have somewhere with carryover grass that they're using that aren't relying as much on growing season grass. We have issues with like cheatgrass, that's a big April grass here that people can be grazing while they're letting their native pasture get up and growing. Things like introduced pastures and like crested wheatgrass is a big grass we have here that greens up earlier, has a big fall regreen usually when we have moisture to do so. But trying to build those opportunities into your grazing plan to basically extend the capability of grass that has a different cycle, a different green up cycle, and a different peak point of energy, and being conscious of what you're using as you're using it to know how long you have to let that recover to be back to its peak performance.